Today I want to share 5 spring projects that you can tackle in the garden right now. The first is to plant up your potatoes. I'm tackling this job a little bit differently this year. I usually plant my main crop varieties in the ground and I'll stick to first and second earlies in grow bags, but to save on space this year I'm going to grow all of my potatoes in grow bags. It just means that I'll have an extra bed in the garden free from May to September to try new things and grow other crops. So I chitted these potatoes, which just means pre-sprouting them in the greenhouse, and you can see it's produced these lovely short stubby stems. And for first earlies I plant 3 potatoes per grow bag, and for main crops I plant 2. This is just to allow the main crop potatoes more space to bulk up. For earlies it's nicer to harvest a smaller potato. So I just fill the bags about a third of the way with a really good rich compost, and then place my tubers in the soil and then cover them with about another third of compost. I've seen some gardeners fill the bag to the top with compost, which you can do, or you can fill it with another third and then come back and top it up once your tubers have put on foliage growth that sits about 4 inches or so above the soil, and you can come in and earth them up, so to speak, and add more compost later on. Both ways work, it's just personal preference. So once I've labelled them, I'll move them into the greenhouse. It's still quite cold outside at the moment, so until it warms up and temperatures are above freezing at night, I'll just keep them in the greenhouse. Because we plant our potatoes well before the last frost, once the foliage is up, if we still are expecting frost on the forecast, I'll move them back into the greenhouse, or I'll move them to a shed just until those frosty nights have passed. The second job that you can tackle right now is to make your sweet pea or climbing vine supports. I'm using a mixture of both bamboo and hazel this year, just what I have on hand. I leave it to dry somewhere that gets quite a lot of wind over the winter so that it's not creating any moisture or mould on the canes. So I'm just creating a quite simple teepee structure here for my sweet peas that spans the length of this bed, or the width of this bed I should say. It's very simple in that it's just 2 canes tied together, and then you repeat that process 5 times along the width of the bed, and then you stabilize it with 1 cane across the top, and you just tie it all together with twine. I ran out of twine while I was making this teepee, so I can't show you how I just feed the twine all the way through from the base to the top to support the peas as they climb, but I will show you that in another video. But it's very simple to do. You just want to make sure you start your twine quite close to the bottom so it's easy for your seedlings to find their way onto the twine and make their way up the canes. To tie off each set of 2 canes, I just use a length of twine, which I wrap round the stems twice, and then I weave through them twice, and then I just tie them off in a double knot, just around about 4 inches down from the top of the cane. So the horizontal support just feeds through the V of the vertical canes that you've created, and you just tie that horizontal cane to the vertical ones with more twine. So the third job that you can tackle now is to pot up dahlias. Our growing season here is ridiculously short, so I like to tackle this job now just to make sure I can promote the earliest blooms I possibly can. This is a late summer flower, but the early blooms that I can encourage are so appreciated and such a bonus. So I start with my overwintered dahlias and I'll just unwrap them. I store them in newspaper with a sprinkling of vermiculite in the shed. I just make sure and store them with the label attached, just to make my life easier come spring. So I'll just take them out and inspect all around the tuber just to make sure that it's still healthy, that there's no mold, and that every tuber is firm. Then I'll look for an appropriate size pot, something that's not too large but fits the dahlia quite snugly. I fill my pots with a peat-free multi-purpose compost, something again that's quite nutrient rich to give them a bit of a boost as they start off. You'll often find growth already has started around where the old stem is, just at the base of that. You might find some new shoots, which is always a really good sign after they've been in storage for so many months. As well as growing my overwintered dahlias from last year, I also made a small order with Farmer Gracy for around 8 or so tubers. If you are interested in the variety names, I'll pop them in the description box down below. So dahlias do not like the cold and they will not survive a frost. So I like to start mine off either in the greenhouse if the temperatures are warm enough, and I have even been known to bring mine into the house overnight and then take them back out to the greenhouse in the morning until the last frost has passed. But I have a lot of dahlias that I'm growing this year, so I am probably not going to do that. She says, we'll see. So job number 4 that you can tackle anytime over the spring months is to divide and transplant any perennials. I wanted to move this Nepeta that has been in the same position now for around 4 years and desperately needs to be divided. So I cut it back first as I hadn't tackled that job yet, and then I dug it up and used the sharp end of the spade to divide it into 2. This variety of Nepeta is called Walker's Low, and although it looks quite woody just now, it will flush back from the base and it is the most superb colour all summer long. I prefer this over lavender, which really hasn't done well in my garden. What I'm doing now is moving most of the Nepeta I have dotted around the garden to the potager, and as well as that I ordered some plug plants earlier on in the year of Nepeta that I'm also planting there. So instead of tulips and then dahlias like I did last year, I'm going for a more perennial, less maintenance theme. Just something that will come back year after year with just a small cutback on the Nepeta in late winter or early spring. So the theme is basically lots of different varieties of alliums and some tall spiky verbena, and then underplant that with Nepeta so it creates sort of a cloud of purple underneath the long tall spikes and sort of hides the allium foliage as it's dying back. I'm hoping it will create a really soft but lovely impact in that space. So anything that I lift and divide, I make sure that I'm transplanting it the same day. I don't really amend the soil that I'm transplanting into. You can add mycorrhizae just to make sure that you're giving the roots a bit of a boost before you plant them in the hole. But with these alliums, they're bulbs and they'll be absolutely fine just being popped straight into the ground, and I just make sure to give everything a really good water once I'm done. And the 5th and final job that you can tackle in April is to sow more of the tender annuals. Exactly when you sow depends on the area that you're in, but things like sunflowers, your squashes, pumpkins, straw flowers, zinnias. In my area in the UK, it's the perfect time to start these off to give them around 4 to 6 weeks of growing time before they're ready to be planted out. And at that point you should have robust, healthy seedlings that can be hardened off and popped into the ground. So my seed sowing process is pretty much the same for everything. I'll use a peat-free multi-purpose compost that I pre-moisten just a little bit, just to kind of hold that compost together, which sort of eliminates air pockets as you're filling up your seed trays, and then I'll fill up my seed trays or 9cm pots or whatever it is that I'm using. It could be loo roll holders, it could be root trainers. Then I will write out my labels and sow the seeds according to the instructions on the back of the packet. I mentioned in a video a couple of weeks back that I was growing lots and lots of sunflowers this year. I don't have tons of 9cm pots, which I would preferably grow them in, so instead I'm going to grow them in 9-cell module trays and just have one label for each tray just to save on space. I'm hoping that I've started them off late enough that I won't need to pop these on. Fingers crossed, we'll see how that goes. I am sowing 2 seeds per cell just to up my chances with germination, and if both come up, I'll transplant one into another cell on its own. Technically, sunflowers are a hardy annual, but I treat them more as a tender one and just start them off indoors, just with that extra boost of temperature. It will give them a head start on growing, and then I'll move them back out to the greenhouse once they're up and established and grow them on there before planting outside. So in the past couple of years I have started to use vermiculite just to top off my seed trays. I found things were just drying out far too quickly in the greenhouse, and vermiculite is just really beneficial to keep in the moisture. So just a light sprinkling on top of each seed tray seems to work wonders, and I thoroughly recommend it if you haven't tried it. And that's it for 5 spring jobs that you can tackle right now. I do hope that you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please do subscribe and turn on the notification bell. That really helps to grow my channel, and I'll see you next time. Take care.